Hey everyone, it's Alex and welcome to the Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. If you'd like to support the content, consider hitting the like button. It helps tremendously with that whole YouTube algorithm thing. I'm actually doing 11 decks because Pixie doesn't crack the top 10 right now. Pixie is generally underperforming in the meta, so if you're trying to get that weekend mission done, this is currently the best list for her. It's a high Evo based shell. It actually runs Hope Summers as well, but if you want to cut Hope Summers or if you don't have Hope Summers, you probably end up replacing her with Infinite, just in case you're someone who's a free-to-play player and you happen to get Pixie, okay? With that being said, as we move into the actual top 10, something worth noting here is this week is kind of interesting in the sense that we did have two major meta shakeup cards in Pixie and in Hope Summers, and statistically, we have a lot of decks that are kind of all over the place. We don't have good data that excludes bots, right? We have a lot of bot inflation during the first week of the season, and as a result, this top 10, we just don't have enough post-infinite data yet, so we are incorporating data from like the leveling process. So these decks are going to focus more around the decks that are performing from a cube rate and win rate perspective. However, on the leveling process itself, okay? So we are not unable to subtract the bot factor statistically at the moment. So we are going to be focusing on general archetypes that'll help you rank up in Marvel Snap for this week. And as our data gets more refined in coming days and weeks, we will be able to release additional videos to give you some more clarity. Just want to give you that heads up. And for that reason, I'm actually not even showing win rates or cube rates for this video because they're so inflated, they're basically irrelevant numbers. So Pixie, this is the one that you want to use. And again, if you don't have Hope Summers, you can add in your Infinite. We go to number 10 here. Number 10 is a Darkhawk Annihilus shell. Part of the reason why this particular shell does so well during the leveling process, I think, is because bots have a hard time reading Sentry. You play Sentry, it sends a void to the right. Bots are like, well, I'm up in 2 locations or whatever. And then they snap on you, Annihilus, and they're like, well, I guess I lose now. So you're able to get a very favorable cube equity out of bots. Moreover, it does a very good job of clogging locations against like the Silky Smooth style decks and Bounce, which are really prevalent right now as a lot of people try to experiment with Hope Summers specifically. So Darkhawk does some disruption, Annihilus does some clogging, and overall I think you're in a pretty good shape here. A very good climbing deck currently in at number 10. Taking us to number 9 is Loki. Loki has been resurging in the meta over the last couple of weeks, and it holds itself at number 9 currently. It is more of a competitive centric deck. This is the kind of deck that I think gets better as more people get to Infinite and people start to climb specifically for the higher echelons of the ranked ladder. But as a kind of bot farming deck, it's okay. I'd actually prefer the prior Darkhawk one, though this win rate is slightly higher. Ultimately though, I think Loki is in a very good spot. This particular shell is actually using Gladiator, which is cool to see. I like when a little bit of spice is added to the Loki shells, and that's exactly what you see here. Number 9 is Loki. Number 8. This is where Hope's initial kind of representation on the top 10 comes into play here, and we're looking at Hope Move. Now, this is an archetype that I think a lot of people have very high expectations for. The idea of using Elsa Bloodstone again with Angela and Kitty Pryde got people really excited, and it's doing well, but it's not doing as good as maybe you would have thought. A lot of the decks from the prior season, for instance, are wildly outperforming this list, but it's fun, it's novel, people are doing things they hadn't done before, but I'll tell you my experience, I think Angela feels terrible in these decks. Elsa feels okay, but not nearly as good as she used to, obviously. And Kitty Pryde, if you're not activating Hope Summers, Kitty Pryde's not getting that big at all, right? So it's kind of interesting to see how this deck is shaking up. It used to be way better, but then it was completely broken, and now it feels like okay, it's much more balanced, but I think it's missing the top end, and once you see people start to play some of the top decks I'm about to show, I don't think this deck has the vertical power output to actually compete with the Hellas and stuff like that. So that might be an issue as we move into the next week or two, so just be aware of that. We go into number 7 here, and it's Hella Discard. Not Hella Discard, Heli Discard, Hella Carrier that is. This is using the Apocalypse kind of Heli Carrier type deck. You have a Collector in this particular deck as well, which takes advantage of obviously the card generation of Hella Carrier and of course of Swarm being repeatedly discarded, and Apocalypse as well. A very cool deck. I like the addition of Gambit in these lists. Helps to kind of take out an early Zabu, for instance, in a lot of decks, and there's a lot of like early plays right now, which even Morbius, right? Killing a Morbius right off the top is pretty strong for a discard deck. So you take some vertical power out of your opponent by doing that, and then you play your own Morbius or something. Your own Morbius survives. So a lot of good options here. I like this deck a lot, coming in at number 7, and then we go to number 6. and it's Hope Thanos. Thanos, could you believe it, has just been a great spot for so many of the new cards coming out. It was great all through the prior month. Obviously, there's like, Call Obsidian was a fantastic addition here. There was even decks that were running Black Swan at some point with the change to Lockjaw. But now we're in the cycle of, well, we're not going to use Lockjaw anymore. Let's do the classic ramp into lockdown thing. So Professor X is making a comeback here. Hope Summers allows that to happen. Psylocke allows that to happen. Time Stone allows that to happen. And I mean, it's just a good deck. It's performing very well. It's interesting to see the Lockjaw variant, kind of giving way a little bit. It's still being played a lot. It's still good. It's still a good archetype. But overall, Thanos seeing a resurgence with the lockdown style, which I mean will only last until, I'm assuming, War Machine comes out. So play it while you can as we move on to number 5, which is Tribunal. Tribunal has been one of those decks that have been really sneaky in the meta. It's a very strong deck. It has the ability to go more vertical than Hela. The Hela Tribunal is no longer being played. You have the very straightforward play line of, Onslaught, Tribunal, and Iron Man, and just putting up tremendous power from that perspective. Miss Marvel, and I like the addition of Super Scroll for the counterplay in a lot of the obviously the ongoing cards, but very specifically for against other ongoing kind of Tribunal players, which are actually increasing in popularity. So a little bit of tech here in the Super Scroll, I do like it, and statistically the Super Scroll does add a little bit of win percentage to the current deck. So I do like it. Tribunal at number 5, and as you start playing against more human players, as you get into Infinite as well, this is going to be a successful deck for you, generally speaking. Moves on to number 4. This is absolutely one of my favorite decks of the last couple weeks, and it's Galactus. I mean, I traditionally have not been a Galactus player, but this deck has completely sold me on it. Hope Summers has a very interesting role to play in this deck. I've talked about it many times. I tend to actually cut Jeff from this deck and play Daredevil, because if you don't have Ravonna Renslayer, I like the very kind of on-the-nose play that you can make with Hobgoblin Daredevil together. It's just something worth considering. I do really like Selene in this deck. I think it adds a little bit of spice to it. But what's interesting about Hope Summers, and I wonder if over time, statistically, the version without Hope Summers actually will be the one that outperforms, because when you have Hope Summers and you're playing the goblins in, yeah, you're getting that extra energy, but Hope Summers is sitting in the lane and prevents your Galactus, right? So if you're going to be playing this deck, it's important you play Hope Summers on the left or middle, so that if you Sentry and send a Void over on the right, it gives you a secondary Galactus option. So it allows you to keep Galactus as an available play on turn 6 or 5, while you're actually still generating energy and disruption in the other locations, okay? Gives you more options. If you're playing Hope Summers on the right, you play Sentry there as well, then you're just kind of screwed, and Galactus is more or less useless, right? So just something to note when playing this deck, which has been one of my absolute favorite of the current meta. I love it. And hey, would you believe it? Destroy is still good. It has been good for the longest time. It continues to be good, and it'll probably forever just be good. It's currently number 3 in win rate, cube rate against bots, against players. It's just an overall damn good deck. It has no weakness. It just does everything. There's nothing that this deck cannot do. I tried to actually play some variations of it with Lady Deathstrike, and it just wasn't quite as good. I'm like, hey, I'm seeing a lot of Draculas, and a lot of all these cards I think Lady Deathstrike can deal with, and ultimately just Classic Destroy gets it done. So coming in at number 3 is Classic Destroy. Nothing much to say there. And another one that has nothing much to say is She-Not. Now, She-Not's top rated version actually is this one here. It does not run Pixie, does not run the Hope Summers, which I am seeing a lot of variations with Hope Summers. I do like those variations as well, but honestly, it's classic Infinite that's doing so good right now. And what I will say is, if you are looking for specific Hope Summers decks that utilize She-Not, then I did cover that in yesterday's video, which was the best decks of Pixie and Hope Summers thus far. But overall, statistically, this is the one that's performing. I personally have been including Hope Summers in cutting Cosmo, and I've even cut Kyera to include armor because it allows me to float a little more. So that's the changes that I've been making. Some decks are even cutting Leech now. There's a lot of different variations of She-Not, so stay tuned. I'm probably going to make a video about one shortly because I just can't help myself. I'm a She-Not lover, what can I say? But regardless, it is a high performing deck. It continues to do very well. It sits at number 2 for the week. And then we go to Apocalypse Discard is being number 1. This is the highest win rate deck, highest cube rate, one of the highest cube rate decks, I should say. It has just been incredibly good. And this is where I get a little concerned because like this deck, it's not being superseded by Hope Summers yet. I think we're still in the brewing phase of Hope Summers and Pixie. I think Pixie, it's unlikely Pixie outperform Hope Summers at this point without a buff or anything. I mean, we might be taken by surprise, but honestly, Apocalypse discard, it's been damn good. Corvus Glaive, Dracula, Proxima Midnight, it's all the classics in here. I mean, classics for the last month, I guess, but what I will say, it's just a high-performing deck, and it's kind of crazy to see that we got 2 new cards, and like it was one of the top performers of last month that just sticks around. It says, nope, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still damn good, and if you want to climb to infinite, you can still play me. Guys, if you like the content, consider subscribing. I would sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.